I will take you through the Tuakiri and eduroam federated services. And it may sound a bit weird why both of them are here at the same time. And they are different, but what they have in common is that both are federated services in the sense that they allow users from different organizations to authenticate to a collection of services. Where they are different is that Tuakiri lets you access websites. It's primarily web single sign-on, so it can be used for other services as well. And eduroam lets you connect to Wi-Fi networks. So they look very different, but there are characteristics they have in common. So let's dive into Tuakiri first. And Tuakiri is an identity federation. So that means it connects multiple service providers, which could be websites requiring login, who trust multiple identity providers to authenticate users and make claims about them. That is a definition of an identity federation. But if you look at what it looks like on a website, there would be a button to trigger the login. It could be combined with other login flows. It could be just a single login button. It could say login via Tuakiri. But regardless of the form, it would take you to a page that makes you select your organization, either at the discovery service that we operate as part of Tuakiri or a custom one could be used. And after selecting the organization, the user is redirected to authenticate through the organization's identity provider. That could be either a login form or it could be a further redirection, for example, for authenticating with an Entra ID login. And afterwards, the user is redirected back to the service with attributes about the user, confirming who the user is, the affiliation status, and so on. Overall, in Tuakiri, we have identity providers, that is authentication services that allow users to access these services using Tuakiri for authentication. And currently we have all 8 universities, all but one crowd research institutes, but with the landscape changing, the Crown Research Institutes are migrating to public research organizations, so that will change, and I trust we will have all of them in Tuakiri. And we currently extend also to independent research organizations, where we so far have 2, but I also hope we'll have more of them soon. Now, most members now use Tuakiri hosted IDP, where we as REANNZ operate the IDP server for the member organization and redirect their users to authenticate via their Entra ID. They save the organization the hassle of having to manage an on-prem identity provider and has been greatly appreciated and just makes it much easier to join Tuakiri as an identity provider. If you ask what information is passed about a user in a Tuakiri login, the important part is not everything is released to every service. It is released on an as-needed basis as part of the registration with Tuakiri. The service indicates which attributes will be required. We evaluate that whether there is genuine need. And after having that approved, these attributes would get released still with user's consent. So the user would get a consent screen showing the attributes. That would be released, and it has to confirm. Attributes include name in various forms, given name, surname, preferred name, combined as a full display name, the email address of the user, affiliation, whether the user is staff, student, an alumni, and services can then use that to decide whether the user gets access, for example, whether it's falls under the subscription that organization has with the service, or in other ways use it for an authorization decision. The attributes further contain information about the organization the user is coming from, which would be the same for all users from that organization, like the organization name in a machine readable form, human readable form. And it also passes user identifiers, which are some are hashes, some are transparent, readable, and just because of how the technology evolved, there are several identifiers in play. And we are currently transitioning from the older ones to the newer single subject ID, single pairwise ID. This is a screenshot of what the consent screen can look like, and it also shows the attributes that are being released. In this case, for my own login to a service operated by the Swiss Federation switch. Now, if you ask about what services can a user with Tuakiri access use, we have about 80 services directly connected into Tuakiri, but almost 4,000 more services available via edugain, is the Federation of Federations global network that connects identity federations around the world that Tuakiri is connected to. You can see the full list of services in the Tuakiri service catalog, and we also render a separate page listing the services available in edugain. Both of these links are available from the REANNZ website. Also, the invite for this webinar had a link to the Tuakiri page on their website, and from there it's really easy to find the links to the Tuakiri and edugain service catalogs. This diagram is to illustrate what the flow is, both in terms of the user experience and how the background flows that make it all work. So the bottom half of the diagram just illustrates as a sequence diagram what it's like for a user. And in this case, the user is accessing globus.org, the data transfer service operated by Incommon, the US Identity Federation that we connect to via edugain. And so when the user accesses globus.org, the user is asked to select the organization, and the list offered will include organizations from all around the world. So a New Zealand user should be able to find their New Zealand-based institution in their Discover service, and after selecting it, will be redirecting to their IDP to authenticate. That can involve the further redirection to authenticate via Enter ID. And after successful authentication, there is a sequence of redirect back to the IDP, back to the service globus.org, and then the user can access the service. If you look at the upper half of the diagram of how the metadata is exchanged, each service and each IDP is registered in the national federation. So the diagram shows Incommon, the US Federation, AAF, the Australian Access Federation, and Tuakiri, New Zealand Identity Federation. And all of these publish metadata into edugain, and in turn download the edugain metadata aggregate. In XAML, the technology underpinning the identity federations, metadata is an XML document that describes an entity participating in the federation, while an entity can be an identity provider or a service provider. And so these XML documents that list the entity identifiers, URL endpoints, SAML certificates get collated by the national federations, published into edugain, aggregated, and then the aggregate stream is consumed by each of the national federations and further distributed to their IDPs and SPs. If we look at the just highlights of the services available via Tuakiri. So one big category are general subscriptions, which make it easier for libraries to manage access, and instead of relying on IP restrictions that subscribers can only access from on-campus IP and cannot access it from where we're working remote, authenticating to the subscription via a login means it can be accessed from anywhere. And by using the identity federation, the users don't have to get yet another login just for accessing the journal subscription with a specific publisher, but instead just use their institutional login via the identity federation. And Elsby, Springer, Thomson Reuters, Clarivate, Nature Research are all in Tuakiri, just as an example of the types of services you can get. Then we also have services that provide access to high performance computing, data-intensive research tools. So as I already used as the example, globus.org, the data transfer service. We run the REANNZ instance of File Center that uses Tuakiri for authentication. Our advanced computing services use Tuakiri for both the projects portal for submitting project applications and for actually accessing HPC services. The Nectar Cloud, operated out of Australia, also collaborates with New Zealand and uses Tuakiri for accessing their services. And just as a way of accessing research data, the US National Institute of Health also uses the Identity Federation and through EduGain accepts Tuakiri login to various restricted datasets. Interestingly, they are the trailblazer in adopting new technologies, for example, signaling multi-factor authentication that happened for the federated login, or passing information about identity assurance of the user's account. Further services in Tuakiri are various research and education community portals, the coded EHEX websites for research reporting, ORCID, the researcher ID service that collects information in publications, can accept a Tuakiri login through EduGain. There are various tools for research data management planning, various license managers. For example, MATLAB runs a license server where an institutional subscription, when it's used for handing out individual licenses, uses federated login via EduGain. So the reach is quite broad. You have various collaboration spaces, Confluence instances shared via their operator to their national federation, and even some business support services, purchase platforms, hiring platforms. And last but not least, learning support. So various learning portals, either operated locally by an institution but shared by the federation because of collaborative courses, or learning platforms that is best choice where institutions send their students for subscribed course content. There's also a service for digital transcripts of student achievement, and ETV service that provides video recordings based on subscription. And both staff and students can access. They use different permission models that staff can also archive videos, students only watch. So interesting use of the attributes returned as part of the login for authorization decisions. And for services directly targeting students, we have several student associations that use Tuakiri for authentication to their website. And there's also a number of services that verify students' status for issuing discounts. And yeah, these are available via Tuakiri as well. So that wraps up the services available in Tuakiri. If you look at what's the future work in Tuakiri, right now we are going through an upgrade of the core tooling that underpins Tuakiri. I have been already in contact with some of you on this. For the actual use of Tuakiri, it does not change anything. But for those who administer registrations in Tuakiri, the tool is being replaced, and yeah, the process of how you update your Tuakiri registration changes. We are also helping our members with the CRI to Pro migration, and a project in the pipeline on increasing the security of logins is both to let IDP signal assurance levels. This is still to be done, but for the multi-factor authentication, we have it supported across most IDPs, and services can now request multi-factor authentication and ensure that it was indeed performed. If you would like to know more about this, please get in touch, and I would be happy to help you configure your existing service to request multi-factor authentication. This wraps up the part about Tuakiri. So I would ask if there are. So let's now move on to eduroam. And eduroam is a service for access to Wi-Fi that started as a Wi-Fi sharing agreement between two Dutch universities. We let your users onto our Wi-Fi if you let our users onto your Wi-Fi. And that grew into a global network by just as a saying, can we join your club? Can we join your club? That now spans 46,000 locations. This is just a map showing where all you have locations. That includes Antarctica. That includes a large number of locations in New Zealand. This is a zoom in on New Zealand, in which all places you can get eduroam coverage. And eduroam is also a federation. Now, the shift from Tuakiri is in eduroam, service providers operate locations, essentially Wi-Fi access points that broadcast the eduroam network, and identity providers authenticate their own users. And then you can have member organizations that join either as SP only. We now have two airports, for example, that have joined as SP only. They provide the eduroam Wi-Fi on their existing Wi-Fi infrastructure, and your device seamlessly authenticates. Or the typical part is joining as an IDP and SP. So your users get access to eduroam worldwide, and you offer your Wi-Fi for access to anyone with an eduroam account. And by the way, if you try the logic and ask, can someone be an IDP only? That's a no by the principle of eduroam design. You have to share if you want to play. So anyone who wants to get access to Wi-Fi needs to share their own Wi-Fi as well. Now, REANNZ is the eduroam national roaming operator for New Zealand. So we operate eduroam for New Zealand. Members connect to us. Their access point when it sees an eduroam visitor through multiple steps connects to our servers, and we then delegate the authentication to the user's home institution. And we also connect to the global eduroam hierarchy. So it could be that the home institution is overseas. I have a diagram here showing the connections. So if you look at the bottom half from the right, you have a user visiting a location with a device that sees an access point broadcasting the eduroam network. starts connecting, and the authentication request for connecting to Wi-Fi is passed to the SP server operated by the member, and using the radius protocol, it talks to our federation level radius, and then if it's a New Zealand user, directly to their member IDP radius, and then to their directory service. Now, what's shown here and has been the traditional way of authenticating users is an on-prem directory service, something exposing an LDAP interface typically, traditionally Active Directory or another LDAP. I'll get to further options later. Just to follow this diagram through, when it's an overseas user from the federation level radius, it goes up to our regional partners, which are RNet in Australia and Hong Kong. And from there, it can connect to global eduroam and then follow a similar hierarchy down to reach a member IDP in a national federation. And similarly, if a New Zealand user is traveling overseas and finds an eduroam access point somewhere, they would go through their through the member organization offering it and their federation and eduroam hierarchy to us, and then we would forward the authentication request to their identity provider server. So through international collaboration, this provides Wi-Fi access globally. What in the end eduroam gives you is local connectivity. All of this diagram is about how the authentication happens, then each location provides their own real connectivity for the actual traffic. Now, this is a more involved version of the diagram that shows the other options of how the authentication could happen. So in green is the traditional, on the left-hand side, the green row member IDP, member identity service, is what we've had on the previous slide. Now, there is a new option being rolled out now, the row below, hosted IDP radios, which allows using cloud-based Entra ID instead of the on-prem service. This comes with the difference that instead of doing a live credential check, verify username, password at the time of connecting, as this doesn't really work with Entra ID, which can use various authentication methods, would use MFA, that wouldn't really work with the connection settings you can have on a typical device. What instead is done is the user accesses a portal and gets eduroam credentials with embedded certificates issued by the Let's Wi-Fi service, the blue box. And we can operate that service for the membership. And this service, when provisioning the credentials, makes the user authenticate with institutional Entra ID and stores eduroam credentials on the device. And then these credentials authenticate against our service directly, just verifying the X509 certificate. And the member can then avoid complicated solutions that would push Entra ID accounts into another service set up just so for the verification. So the stored credentials based on X509 certificates overcome that. That, however, comes with a complication where the credentials are valid for a fixed period of time, and the user would then have to renew them after that period of time, 6 or 12 months expires. So that's an option that that is being rolled out, will be available soon, and talk to us if you are interested in that. Just to complete the picture, the other options of issuing accounts is we also operate the eduroam visitor access service. So that's for short-term visitors. For if a member wants, typically a member operates a guest Wi-Fi network, and most visitors to a member site could possibly have eduroam, but there would be a few users who do not have eduroam, and the member still wants to provide Wi-Fi access for them. So the solution to turning off the guest Wi-Fi network and making everyone use eduroam is to issue temporary eduroam credentials to the visitors who don't have eduroam accounts. So that's what the eduroam visitor access service is for. It allows issuing short-lived credentials for a few days that can be delivered to the user via text message, email, or a piece of paper. Can be pre-provisioned in advance, or there's also a self-service option where if someone sees a screen displaying a code, texting the code to a 4-digit number we operate would send the user back eduroam credentials valid for the day. So there are various options for getting temporary credentials and getting rid of the guest Wi-Fi network. And finally, there's also REANNZ managed IDP, which is a service available just for small organizations under 200 staff for getting eduroam credentials based on a hosted service. However, these are not linked to institutional identity, would need to be managed separately. And the hosted IDP service that we are rolling out would mostly supersede that with just linking directly to the member's Entra ID. And finally, the right-hand side of the diagram for how the what's used on the SP side and what access points connect to. The traditional way where has been member operates a service provider server that access points connect to. There are situations where the member is not able to, or for various reasons cannot operate a service as an SP server. So we are now offering a hosted SP service. So if it's a unique situation where the access points need to connect to something, but there is no member SP server, it can also be our hosted SP. So if you are in that situation, let us know and we should be able to help with that. Additional services that also underpin function in eduroam is one is the eduroam member portal at member eduroam net NZ, which we operate, and this is where member administrators register eduroam locations so that they can be used to populate the global map of where eduroam is available. And also, just users using eduroam can use the portal to locate nearest eduroam location, see the locations available in New Zealand, and also the locations available globally. Similarly to what I was showing for Tuakiri, how the information is collected by the local federation and shared globally, aggregated, and aggregate downloaded. The portal also gets the aggregated list of all eduroam locations that is refreshed daily. So users can use it to plan their trip. There is also an eduroam companion phone app that downloads the map for offline use, and users can then use it when traveling abroad to finding where can they get connected to eduroam and do whatever research and education people do. And last service on this list is the configuration assistant tool, CAT. This is a service that's operated by REANNZ, the European NREN that operates most of core eduroam infrastructure. And the CAT service helps create configuration profiles. So instead of telling users, select the eduroam network and select this way of authenticating, which users tend to either get wrong or skip parts or just find it really tedious. The CAT creates a configuration profile where the admins enter that information once, the users and download the profile, and the profile configures everything on the device the way it should be. That results into more secure and reliable connection profiles deployed on devices. And it's easier to roll out. Yeah, roll out eduroam for all your users. It creates profiles that can be applied to manage devices with configuration management tools, or users could be just pointed to it. And for things like certificate rollovers or changes to the certificate used by the eduroam IDP, this tool makes it much more manageable for end users. So if your organization is not using the CAT yet to manage eduroam profiles, please talk to us and we would be happy to get you set up. And that wraps it up. Any questions on eduroam or further questions on Tuakiri?